Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 396. Today we're going to talk about the Halls of Terra expansion for Relic. Well, what does this expansion add to Relic? Well, the first thing it adds is the Halls of Terra, which is a new board that attaches to the old board. Now the other thing that it adds are these sort of Imperial factions that you can be aligned with and do favors for, and then you can get different special abilities and also kind of spend that favor, or it acts kind of like influence in the basic game. There's also a couple of new characters and a couple of new scenarios, which is what I really want to focus on, and then talk a little bit about, of course, the new board and all the new faction things that it adds. So let's take a look at it and I'll tell you what I think. Okay, so we can see, if we zoom out a little bit here, all the stuff that's now in the game. It all does fit back in the original base box. I'm going to go ahead and throw out the expansion box. I've removed the insert, of course, from the original, but it all does fit back in there. I've got a bunch of everything bagged up in there. But let's look at here. As far as the new stuff that the expansion adds, it does add some things to, some of the new decks of cards and things like that. But the main thing here, of course, is this new board, which you can see here. And you go ahead and attach that on this side of the board. And so your table space is relatively eaten up a little bit with this new board. And there's also, of course, some new scenarios and different things. But let's zoom into this board. I'll kind of take it aside, and then we can look at how this sort of thing operates. Now you can use this with the different scenarios however you want. Now the other thing that it adds that you're going to need to add to the game are these tokens over here, which I'll show you. Now each player actually starts with a different token based on their sort of affiliation. And even the original characters come with that. So this says Adeptus Astaris, and this is Adeptus Sororitas. And then we've got another one here that says Imperial Nobility. Now these are the new cards I'm showing you, but all the other pre-existing characters have those different affiliations. So you'll start with one token of a particular affiliation based on whatever you start with, and then you can use those to get different special abilities and things in the Halls of Terra itself. So I've gone ahead and rotated the board here so you can get a good look at it. Now you can see there's some orange icons, and so you're going to actually get orange encounter cards instead of red, blue, and yellow. There's now orange cards that you're going to draw when you move to these different spaces. And just like other spaces, there's things where you roll some dice and then figure out what's going to happen there. Now if we zoom in here, let's take a look at this corner right there. You can see that you actually have to pay 2 influence when you move in here from the side of the board. So this is going to be actually right here. You've got to pay 2 influence and stop, and this is actually one big space right here. So that's in each of the different corners of the board. And then movement around the circle here is basically just like on the main board. You roll dice, pick a direction, and then you move around like so. But now you've got here the palace gates, and this is when you get into the Halls of Terra possibly. And this is similar to some of the other gated spots where you get into the different tiers on the main board. So here we can see the palace gates, and this says if you have at least 3 affiliations, remember you start with 1 affiliation, you may spend all remaining movement points to move down to the Tilanoth space. So if once you move down here, you test 8 using your highest stat like strength or willpower. If you fail, you lose 1 of that attribute and move to the palace gates, back up. If you succeed, move to either Eternity Gate, which is here, or over to the Administratum Archives. And that's on your next turn. And this is just kind of like you're in the inner tier where you're moving 1 space at a time. So here you can do a couple of different things. But let's see, you can see, let's just go through each of these because these are pretty cool, I think. Lose 1 for each corruption card you have, then test 7 using your lowest printed attribute. If you fail, move back here and into your engagement phase. If you pass, gain 1 of the tested attributes. So what if you tested willpower, you get an attribute, and you discard all of your corruption cards. So I'll go over some of the scenarios, but this is a very important space in one of the scenarios. And then going over to the next spot here, the Sanctum Imperialis, this says gain the champion card that matches 1 of your affiliations. I'll show you those just a second. Then, if you have 9 affiliations, you may move to the Daemon World Braxis space at the end of your engagement phase. And if you know, that is the one that is right at the very end in the center of the board before you move on to the scenario card. So this is sort of a shortcut. I mean, you're going to have to do a lot of work to get here if you have, get all 9 affiliations and stuff. But this is sort of another way in, like a back door, so to speak. Otherwise, you go to the outer or middle tier, any space that you want as well. Now, again, here's some of the examples of the different affiliations affiliation tokens, and again, you start with one of those. And then you can get these different champion abilities here. And so there's one for each of the factions. And once you've got it, you've got it. And so they just are just different little buffs. So your asset limit is increased. Each time you pass a skill test, gain an influence. You know, this is Inquisition. This is a 1 point buff to any skill. There's a few other cards that have that in this expansion. So you can get one of these cool things here, and this is going to help you quite a bit. And it's just another way to kind of improve your character. Now, working to the left from the Titanlith space, then we have the Administratum Archives. And this says test 5 using the influence instead of an attribute. If you fail, lose 1 affiliation, move to the Titanloth space and end your engagement phase. Then we're going to go over here to the Senate, and this says roll a die. For each affiliation, you may choose to add 1 to the result. And the other thing I should mention before I forget is you can actually spend these affiliation tokens, and these actually count as 2 influence instead of 1, so you can use them as well for influence. So you add 1 to the result, gain either 3 influence or 1 affiliation, gain 1 attribute of your choice and 1 completed mission, and remember you need completed missions to get relics, or you can gain a level and draw a relic. And then you can move to the outer inner tier. So this is a cool little area here, and there's all these other spaces, but the goal is to kind of get down here to the bottom, collect affiliations, get rid of corruption, and get relics. There's another cool relic-y kind of scenario. So let's go ahead and talk about well, first, let's go over the characters. I'm kind of saving the scenarios for last. That's really the best part. So let's look at some of the new characters real quick. There is one new Nemesis character, and I apologize, I have not played with this yet, but you can just wanted to show you that it does add a new Nemesis character. He does interact with the Daemon Engine characters, the different encounters that the heroes themselves will run into. And then here's his cool bust there. So I haven't played with him yet, but he is there, and it does add to some of the PvP and stuff that you can have in the game. And now we have here the House Ballesteros Navigator, and this one says you may play a power card to substitute a die immediately after rolling instead of before, which is pretty nice. Oh, and this is her bust, I should say. And then for your movement roll, you may discard one of your face-up corruption cards. Again, a little bit more interaction with corruption to substitute the die result for the discarded corruption card's activation number, because remember they have different numbers that you have on them, so you can actually discard that. So she can kind of grab corruption a little bit more and then spend them. But look at this one here. So it says draw 1 corruption card when we hit this symbol. So you can see as she levels up, you're going to get these different symbols. So this is going to force you to get a corruption card. You may choose to treat the activation number as either 0 or 5 for the purpose of activation, because remember, corruption helps you and does something cool for you, but it makes you more corrupt. So it's sort of a push your luck kind of thing. And so she is really eating that up, but then hopefully she can start discarding them. So that's a very interesting character to play there. And then the next one is the big war machine type of guy. Probably shouldn't say that on a 40K video, but that's okay. So this is the Imperial Terminator here, right? So there's his bust. And then your enemy's battle rolls cannot explode, which comes in pretty handy sometimes, especially if I'm rolling the dice. And when making movement rolls, you must roll 1 additional die. Use the lowest result rolled on ours. He's a little bit slow, but he's beefy. Starts with a strength of 6, which is pretty high, and a life of 6, which is also pretty high as well. So this is kind of your big tank guy. And then we're going to go to the other interesting character here, is the Sister, how do you say that word? Hospitaller. And she's pretty cool, so I like this one a lot. You have the following. Remember, she's got this ability, so she can give +1 to any skill. That's what that gray one is. And then she also has, this is cool here. Anytime during your turn, you may remove 1 character token from this sheet to choose another character in your area, or reset that character's life to its starting life value, and then you gain a completed mission. So she can heal a character and get a completed mission. So that's pretty interesting, because if you're playing a PvP scenario and there's actually a co-op scenario in this one, it's pretty interesting. Now, if you hit these icons again, you can reset your life to its starting value, then discard 1 of your corruption cards and place 1 character token on the sheet. So as you level up, you're going to get these abilities. So you can't do this a whole bunch, but you again want to kind of get some corruption so that you can have something to discard here, and then now you've got this character token that you can go heal somebody and complete a mission. So you're like this medic cruising around healing everybody and completing missions and getting relics for that. So that's a cool character. I really like that one. So now let's take a look at a couple of the 3 scenarios that are in this expansion. So this one here I have not played, but it looks pretty nutty, and it's probably one that's lower on my list to want to play, but I figured I'd show it because, again, it deals with corruption. There's another one that deals with corruption as well, but this one, it just looks like a crazy time, so I don't know about this one, but it looks fun. So each time a player starts a new character, he must draw a corruption card, so you start with 1 corruption. Each time a player would be forced to draw a corruption card, he may instead lose an attribute of his choice. Okay, well, why is that going to happen? Well, each time a player draws a corruption card, he looks at it secretly and chooses to either activate it or flip it face down, ignoring the activation number. So you can, again, similar to the character I showed you previously, you can, just activate it for fun. After any of the player's die rolls, he may draw 1 corruption card to turn 1 of the die rolled to a result of his choice. Each player can do only once per turn, so that's kind of handy. And then players may initiate skill duels against players who have more corruption cards than them. So let's just keep that in mind. Okay, let's keep reading. In addition to the normal outcome of a skill duel, the winner may look at one of the loser's corruption cards, then he may either take that card as if he drew it or discard it. Now, here's the victory condition right here. If you have no corruption cards, then all players without corruption cards win the game together. So if you move in here to the center and you have no corruption, then you and maybe some others win the game. So that is kind of an interesting sort of, dual winning cosmic encounter kind of, temporary alliance kind of thing. Otherwise, all players flip all of their corruption cards face up. Each player adds together all the activation numbers on the corruption cards. The players with the highest combined total wins the game. So that's interesting, right? So you're going to be getting corruption, wanting corruption, not wanting to get too corrupted, because remember, if you get too corrupted, you have to start a new character. And then, but you also maybe try to, to push your luck and then go in and win with the most corruption, or try to win with the share victory with people that don't have corruption. So I haven't played that one. It looks pretty nutty. Now we've got this one here, and this is the co-op one here. So this says players must use the Sol System board when playing this scenario. So you have to have that board. And at the beginning of each player, I'm not going to read this verbatim because I play this one. Each player's movement phase, you reveal the top card of one of the 3 yellow, red, blue encounter decks. If it's a certain type of character, let's see, if it's a daemon, it's also a heretic and different ones, then you're actually going to put a corruption card out onto the board here, over to the soul board over there. And then what's going to happen is if you fill up all of those spots, the players collectively lose. Otherwise, players are going to be traveling to the board, trying to have encounters, and then being able to delete the corruption off of those. Now, to win the scenario, you need to have at least a player come in here and initiate a battle against Abaddon here. And then, now Abaddon's going to add 3 to whatever score you're going to fight on for each corruption card the person has. If you win the battle, each player removes 1 corruption card from a space in Soul. If you lose, you draw a corruption card. If there are no corruption cards in all spaces, then everybody wins together. So it's a cooperative game. You can have the Nemesis players in fighting with this, but it's very cool. It actually works. I was kind of surprised. This is the first one I played. I was like, this doesn't seem like it's going to be that cool, but it actually works pretty well. It feels a lot like Relic. Still you're cruising around the board, trying to beef up your character, and then again, you're trying to get over here, and like I talk about activating this spot to get much of corruption gone, you can actually teleport into here, and there's some teamwork that's happening. You're going through and you're trying to tamp down monsters, because the monsters and stuff that are coming out are going to cause you grief anyway. So you need people kind of doing different things, either trying to focus on this board and eventually killing that, or going and dealing with the corruption over here on that board. So it actually works pretty well. It's pretty interesting. And then we have this last one here. Let me zoom in on this one. So this one's awesome. This is a really interesting one. So this one's all about getting relics, and in this case, all the relics are considered apostate assets. And remember from the last expansion, if you have an apostate asset, you can get attacked by fellow Imperium players. So when you go here, you test 7 using the number of relics you have instead of an attribute. If you succeed, you place a character token on here, and if you fail, you discard one of your relics. The first player to have 3 sheets. So you go around and the relics are just like pouring out of this one. And there's actually some relics put out on the board face down to start the game. And so everybody's open to being attacked because they've got relics. And so you're trying to get just a bunch of relics so that everybody's just focused on that and then going in here. So it's kind of like that Indiana Jones crazy. It really kind of fits the theme of the game as well. You know, a lot more than some of the other scenarios can't have in the past, where you're just trying to grab all and just become a super powerful being with all these awesome items and stuff. So that's pretty much everything in the box. Okay, so that is the Halls of Terra expansion. I showed you pretty much everything that was in there. You got the extra board, a couple extra scenarios, some extra characters. Like I said, there are some extra cards that you're going to feed in and seed throughout the deck. A lot of those deal with corruptions, or they deal with the Halls of Terra itself directly. You've got the new factions, which are really neat. You can just play with that, you know, in the game and have the Halls of Terra and just play one of the old scenarios if you really want to. I really like the co-op scenario, and I really like the last reliquary scenario where you're getting all the relics. That's really fun. You know, those are really good additions to the game, and it's, to me, that's the best part of it. I do like the Halls of Terra, and I do like the extra factions. Those are really cool. I think they kind of flesh out the world a little bit, you know, because you've got sort of your home base. I don't know much 40k stuff, but you know, it's kind of like your home Earth, Imperium, Master, Coruscant, planet, whatever. And so that's cool. You have sort of a tie back to you know, where usually a lot of these expeditions seem like they're driven. You know, a lot of the scenarios like, hey, you're on an expedition to go do this or that, or deal with, you know, people in this different sectors that are way out on sort of out on the bounds. As everything's kind of way out in space, but now you have a sort of a tie back to home, so you can go, you know, somebody's back at base, sort of doing political maneuvering, so to speak, you know, as much as you can in Relic, and then you have other, you know, other parts of the map where you're out in space, you know, fighting and doing different things and encountering different monsters and stuff. So it's cool. It kind of grounds it a little bit more, which is nice. But I really like those two scenarios, and even that weird wacky one with all the corruption and stuff looks like an interesting one to play. So yeah, you know, I would definitely get this. If you like Relic a lot, then this is, to me, like a no-brainer to get. If you're, you know, on the fence about Relic, you probably, whatever, wouldn't even be watching this video, probably. I don't know that it would change up anything for you, but I like it. I'm glad I have it, and I'm glad I have the extra board and stuff. It just, you know, if you played the game a few times or several times, or you're getting kind of bored of it, it does add some different stuff and new ways to level your character. The new characters are neat, and I would try the co-op. I was actually surprised, like I said, about that actually working. It still feels relic-y, you know, and it feels like the same game where you're progressing your characters, you're getting new abilities. Now you've got the whole new affiliation abilities, and each character, you still got to go through those kind of motions and kind of go through that adventure part of the game where you're trying to figure out what kind of character you're trying to create, and then deal with the, you know, the boss at the end. All the players are doing that. So yeah, it's fun. That's good. Take a look at it. Thanks.